PerfActionist Musicians Podcast. Take action to find healthy perfectionism. Discussions about the background of successful careers in music performance, arts and science.
Hello dear musicians, welcome to the second series of the PerfActionist podcast, in which you can follow 10 outstanding and highly experienced professional musicians. As the goal is to provide ideas and a lot of information about how to build and maintain a healthy musical career, you will be listening to these 10 spectacular interviews. Also, I can tell you that I managed to gain some information from music academy students. So students of bachelor and master degrees in music performance shared with me that they are truly interested in learning about healthy mental and bodily strategies to cope with physical and emotional issues. Also, it turned out that only the minority of students are aware of deliberate career planning. On the other side of the highly experienced performers, they talked about in the interviews that they changed their approach to music performance as they accumulated more and more experience as a performing artist. Also, they developed highly focused practicing strategies, and this could happen for various reasons, such as parenthood or the fast-changing repertoire of being in a professional orchestra. And of course, you probably won't be surprised that they also redefined what perfection in music and music performance means to them. So in this series, consisting these 10 interviews, all musical artists also left at least one personal advice to you. And dear listeners, as member of the younger generation of musicians, you can listen to these and also to how these spectacular artists described some career twists and even hardships that they had to go through. Sometimes what they said to me, honestly, was absolutely surprising and even shocking. Actually, this was the case with my first guest, Florian Mitrea, British-Romanian pianist. Florian was born in Bucharest, but he has been based in the UK since 2008, and he is an alumnus and professor at the Royal Academy of Music in London. He is an award-winning soloist with an international performing and teaching career. He was a double laureate at the 2017 Scottish, 2015 Hamamatsu, and 2014 ARD Munich International Piano Competitions, and he won various prizes at many other international piano competitions. Florian has performed at the Carnegie Hall in New York. I met Florian at the Crescendo International Summer Music Institute in Tokaj, Hungary, and I managed to record the interview with him between two sessions of his teaching. For this reason, you may be hearing some background noise. Otherwise, Florian was talking about his experiences with competitions and that how the auditions for these competitions have surprised him. But I leave the full story for you, dear listener. So in the first episode, in the second series of the PerfActionist podcast, welcome Florian Mitrea. Florian, thank you so much for accepting this interview. As I described before, with this podcast I'm interested in to give ideas and possible solutions, and mostly like opportunity to see younger students that established, experienced musicians and artists were younger, were less experienced. Probably they had struggles, they had difficulties, and I'm interested in how actually you became an established artist and what you did in order to do that.
Well, it's a great pleasure to meet you in this very special occasion and to talk about it. And I think I'm also quite passionate about this because it is quite difficult for young emerging artists to know what to do, and sometimes it looks like some people have found a magic recipe to sort of be happy and have a fulfilling careers. And the perfect recipe does not exist. I don't believe it. I think everyone is on a very personal journey, and each person will have very different circumstances that will decide exactly which path they end up taking eventually. But it is probably very useful to hear different stories and see what is possible. And this is what we're really trying at the conservatoire where I teach to try and help students, because a lot of the time it is said that conservatoires should do more about helping students on their path after studies. But because the music world is so different and so varied, it's actually quite difficult, I would even dare say impossible, to give anything but different stories, different scenarios of what people have experienced and what's happened. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about this with you.
So just talking about stories,
Yeah.
I will jump right into the middle. So if you think back to the beginning of your musical career, what changes do you discover in yourself as compared to Florian, the artist, who is teaching at the Royal Academy of Music in London, and let's say 15 years ago? So what you were like,
Yeah.
for instance, 50 years ago, and the way you are thinking now, how you approach. I'm interested in that.
Well, it's actually a very good timeline, because it was 15 years ago that I moved to London. I was 17 and a half, nearly 18 years old. And I finished school, and it was a very quick turnaround, because I didn't go to a music school from the very beginning. I went to a very normal academic school, and in parallel I went to what is called in Romania a music school, but it's not really a music school in the Western understanding of the word. It's pretty much a place where you go to have music lessons, maybe 2-3 hours twice a week. You have piano, and then you have some theory, and that's it. So up to that point, I had gone for about 8 years. I had gone to that one, and for the last 4 years, I did go to a music school, and that was a huge learning curve. And I did that because I realized that I wasn't better at anything else. You know, I was at school with friends of mine were still in touch that were incredibly talented at computing and mathematics and science, and they really had a gift for it. You could tell that they weren't just doing their school homework; they actually did very well. Whereas I didn't have anything of that, but I really felt that I had some love, some passion for music that superseded everything else. So I decided to move to music school, and then I arrived in this institution where everybody was so much more advanced than me. They all, they'd been there since they were 6 years old, and they'd practiced, 7 hours a day, their instruments, and learned everything there was to learn in terms of theory and music history and all that. So I was entirely new, so it was a huge sort of race to catch up with them. And then I finished. I was nearly 18, and I knew I wanted to study with this particular person whom I'd met previously, and I felt I clicked with her. Which I think it's really important when you learn a musical instrument, the person with whom you study. It's not the place necessarily, although it can help, but it's the person that you study with. So I really wanted to study with this lady who happened to be in London. So I basically went to London because of her. I think the main difference that is between me 15 years ago and me now is the conscious decision, the conscious, if you like, statement that I absolutely fundamentally need music in my life. Back then, I still wasn't very decided. I mean, I knew I wanted it. I knew this is what I wanted to finish my studies. I wanted to continue. But I never thought about, well, maybe when I have a family, how is that going to work together? How am I actually going to live as a musician? I never thought about those things. It was almost like a different life, and it was impossible for me to actually look into the future. Now, because of all the experience that I have been through, I'm convinced that for me, music is really a way of life more than a profession. It has to be a professional role. It has to, as well. It has to work enough that I actually can live out of it. But at the same time, I know that I couldn't possibly live without it. That's the main difference. And I needed these 15 years to work this out. Honestly, I don't think I was that convinced when I was 18. As I said, because I never kind of worked all of these things out, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out eventually, getting life as a whole. And I've been incredibly lucky to be supported by a lot of people along the way, and I owe everything to all my teachers who've been very supportive, and personally as well as instrumentally, of course, musically. And I found that with the teachers that I left to go to study with someone else, they became extremely good friends and extremely good supportive friends. And when I had my doubts, which everyone has, I don't believe that there's, or at least in my experience, I don't know any musician who's not had doubts and questions and worries and concerns and all that. And I was very lucky to have people to turn to, and mostly they were my teachers.
Mm-hmm. What are the worries that now you are comfortable to talk about? By opening up. So, if you reveal something of those when you were younger, what were the worries, and what kind of doubts you were struggling and facing?
Well, to be honest, to put a very blunt perspective, job stability. I was seriously worried about, well, is this actually going to work out so that I can live out of music, or will I have to do another job to live, and then I will just play piano on the side? How is it actually going to work out? And as a pianist, I didn't even have the option to say, well, I will audition for orchestras, and maybe I will be lucky enough to have a job in an orchestra, and that will be my life sorted. I didn't even have that, and I wasn't sure how things were going to work out. And what I really wanted from my career. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I of course dreamed about playing concerts. That's why most of us join music. And for a long period of time, I thought I wouldn't be happy unless I had these concerts, one after another, sort of all the time coming through. But obviously, I then had to realize that actually a very small percentage of musicians live like that. There's a very 0.0001% of musicians just play these incredibly well-paid concerts, maybe 5 or 6 a month, and that's all they ever do. In actual fact, what most musicians do is a portfolio of many different things, and that's not new, in a sense. That's not. It's not that in the past musicians were living more easily, they had more job stability. That was always the case. If we look in sort of 20th century kind of thing, or just around there, Edwin Fischer was running his own orchestra because he was, fed up that he, wasn't able to work with other orchestras. So he started his own orchestra, and he was administrating everything about that, as well as playing the piano and teaching and all that. So, I think musicians have always been like that. They would be their own agents, their own administrators, as well as their own professional secretaries and everything. And that took me a long time to realize, that I would not just practice the piano for 8 hours a day and then go and play my concert. I actually would have to become more entrepreneurial about it. Think about, how am I relevant for an audience? Why would a festival decide to hire me instead of someone else? What can I bring to the table? And without becoming fake, because I still love playing the old classics. I'm still excited about playing music that's very, very old, and it's been played for hundreds of years. I didn't turn into sort of playing arrangements of pop music or other things. I still want to play the music I love, the music that I sacrificed my life for. But at the same time, I realized that I had to think a lot more sort of outside the box, and in order to be able to survive. And that sort of that worry of the job stability suddenly became excitement. I, for example, get very excited about teaching. I didn't know I would get that. I started teaching when I was still a student. I was going back home in Bucharest for my holidays, and I'd visit my old music school, and my teacher would say, "Oh, would you like to take this lesson?" And little by little, I started doing these kind of mini master classes every holiday, and little by little, I said, well, I actually would quite like to do this as a more organized form. So I started my own music education project back home, which is, it's work, if you like. It's not work I ever thought I would end up doing, but I get very excited. I love creating different concepts of concerts and projects. So that's how my little festival has started, with this idea that we need to attract more people into the concert hall, more people for music, and the way to do this is to find ways that are relevant for people. So, for instance, the next edition of my festival is going to have a very strong social element to it. We're going to have a production of an opera for one singer and one pianist, just that, and it's about human relationships and communication and how we are not very good about speaking to each other. It's a love story that ends up badly, basically. And then after the performance, we will have soirees where we will invite psychologists and writers, and we will talk about it. And I think that, maybe people don't love opera so much, but they maybe have had relationships in their lives that have failed. Maybe they've fallen out with their partners or their family or parents, and hopefully that will attract them to come and see this opera and see how relevant it is. I firmly believe that music is very much a relevant part of our society and culture, and it only takes a bit of thinking to put it to the audience in a way that you're not going to just come sit down and listen to this music, you will clap and then you go home. There's something there that you might get that might help you in other ways, and you might get benefits from just being there. And one of the wonderful ways that Crescendo has touched me is that that music is put into a much larger context. It means much more, and all of us that we've been here at the Summer Institute, we've bonded at a much deeper level. And of course music is at the core of everything that we do, but it's very much a catalyst, very much a trigger for us to connect in much more different ways. And I needed those 15 years to learn that, yes, I will probably not have, 5 concerts a month and that will be it. I will probably have to work much harder to find other ways of working, but that's exciting. And I would have never thought that. I never thought I would get excited about creating a concert. I thought someone will ask me to play a concert and I'll go and play it. But I learned that, and I'm very, very happy and at peace now with my life and with my career. But I needed those years to learn that.
How were those years when you
were very difficult. At one level, my studying years were some of the happiest years of my life, because when you're in a conservatoire, you're in a very, or at least I felt, in a very protective environment where there will always be some events organized by the institution. There will be a library that you can access. There will be a recording facility that you can use to make some recordings and put yourself on YouTube. There'll be ways that you can use there. And that was wonderful. And I absolutely loved my time as a student, to the point that I never wanted them to stop. And I sort of continued, and I kept being a student until about the age of, say, maybe 25 or 26, so quite a long time, if you like, of being a student, in some degree or form. Of course, you stop being a full-time student, you stop being a brother. The difficulty came when you finish studying, and you're out there, and knowing what to do first, in what order to try things. That was tough. It was pretty tough. And there were 2 or 3 absolutely difficult years where I felt actually quite depressed, because I didn't know exactly where it was going to end up, and I was trying many different things and very few were successful. Then of course I met my now wife and we became engaged, and then I had this kind of feeling of, well, now you're going to have a family, things are getting serious. When you're by yourself and you're just your own, if you don't have a lot of money at the end of this month, it's not a big problem. You will manage somehow. When you start having a family, things change a lot. The perspective changes a lot. So you cannot play around as much as you do when you're just yourself. And the pressure of finding something that would work was very tangible. And I will not deny there were some very difficult moments, including I did contemplate leaving music altogether. I absolutely did, because it just happened, and that's why it's so important to work out how much music really means to you. And I had to go through that to realize that it means a lot, almost everything. I did realize that I couldn't leave music, that I could probably not, I would probably go crazy, I would probably, I would not find balance in my life without music. I had to go through it. I tried leaving it, go and do a different job, because it just happened that those particular years were extremely dry. I think every artist, not just musician, will experience that in their lives at some point, when there's a period of just things not really working out. And here in Crescendo, we spoke a lot about this in our small groups and our meetings about what people go through to find balance in their lives. And I was lucky enough that that period was not long enough that actually, things started to pick up, and I found my own path, if you like, in music. But it was very, very difficult. And, I at one level, I was very lucky to get out of it without too much damage. But I try to be close to my students and try to help offer support as much as I can. Unfortunately, as I said at the beginning, it's a very personal journey, and it has to come from inside. People from outside, they can be close to you, they can hold your hand, but you have to do the walking. And there was a very crucial moment when I literally said to me and to the ones around me, I don't care if I sleep under a bridge, I have to play the piano. I don't care how poor I get, and I realized that might have meant the end of my marriage, and might have meant the end of my family life, but I was just very lucky to have someone next to me that loved me enough to accept that this was a situation. And every day I give thanks for that, because I know it's very difficult to be married to a musician. So it was tough. It was coming out of studying, it was tough, and it was really trying so many different things, and so few worked.
What was working and what didn't?
So, for example, trying to get an agent just was impossible for me. I tried a few auditions. I got to the semi-final rounds of a few agencies, and then something about the connection just wasn't there. We didn't manage to connect enough so that I could find someone that would decide to work with me, to start doing concerts. So that never worked. And I tried so hard. All sorts of, you can do all sorts of preselections in England of trusts and agencies that connect you with concert promoters. That didn't work out. And it was purely luck. I never thought, I was so late coming to music that I never thought I would try the international competition stages. I thought I'm maybe not good enough for it, or started too late for it. And my first international competition was in Germany, in Munich, and I will never forget the experience. It's one of those 4 rounds competitions. It takes about 3 weeks to a month, and you play 3 recitals and 2 concertos, and huge repertoire. I've never kept in my hands that amount of repertoire before. And I thought, well, I'll go and, you play the first round, and it will be just a nice experience, and I'll go home. And honestly, the experience was so strong. I remember, I can see it in my head, going to see the results for the second round and the semi-final, and feeling all that pressure that was, as you advance in competition, I just felt more and more nervous. And that worked out for me. I was a finalist, I got 2 prizes there, and then one competition led to another. So that was Germany. The next year I did Japan, Hamamatsu, and I don't know how the world works somehow, that sometimes you prepare for something. In 2015, which was my year of Japan, there were two big competitions I wanted to try. One of them was the Beethoven competition in Germany. And I thought, well, I quite like playing Beethoven. I think I'm quite capable of doing that. And you normally have to submit a demo recording, a demo filming. And I went back home to Bucharest. I booked a whole day for recording. And I tried it so many times, I think maybe 20 times. I recorded the whole competition program. And I was very happy with the recording. I thought it was accurate and musical and all these sort of things that are important in a competition. When I prepared for Japan, I had a little bit of an injury in one of the fingers, and I booked a recording studio in London for 3 hours, but after 45 minutes, I was in so much pain in my fifth finger, I had to say to the sound master, I'm really sorry, I'll have to stop now because I'm screaming inside, it's so hurtful. And I wasn't 100% happy with the performance. There were two pieces that had to be recorded. One of them was pretty good. The other one I felt I could do better. And then the results came. I did not get accepted in Germany, which I thought, it was a great recording. And I got accepted in Japan with that recording that I felt maybe could be better. A whole huge four-round competition, being in Japan for 4 to 5 weeks. Immense pressure, but somehow, again, I found some sort of inner strength that I could cope with it. I mean, it was very tired. By the end of that one, I was completely flushed. It was right before Christmas, and I went home and I had a complete crash. I didn't do anything for weeks after it.
You were exhausted.
Absolutely. And mentally and emotionally more so than playing. Exactly. But somehow that worked out for me. And then the next year was France and Manchester and China a couple of times.
How old were you at these times?
Between 22, I started at 22, which is again very late. One of my last competitions, I was in France in 2018. I was 26 or 27, and I won the third prize in that competition. The first prize was 17 years old. Was me when I came to London, basically. So already the age difference was palpable. So I was late for everything. I was late for music school. I was late for competitions. But this worked for me. Nothing else worked. I tried to make a CD. I tried to make, I tried to apply for teaching jobs. Didn't get even an interview anywhere to teach. The competition somehow worked for me. And I know a lot of people who tried for years before they succeed. And I just tried this Munich ARD competition in Germany, and I got to the final. And there were not first prizes, but there were two prizes, both in Germany and Japan, enough for me to build on them. And then the first CD came after the Japanese prize. I then went to Japan every year to do master classes, to a concert tour. Some things started to move forward. And then because of the master classes, people worked out, well, actually, he can teach, let's give him some more. And I started, teaching chamber music at my conservatoire. I then wanted to leave, funnily enough, I wanted to go to the Royal College to study one more year. But then my now boss said, if you stay, we have this job opening, why don't you try to apply for this one? It was a fellowship. And I applied for that, and I got accepted for it, and that's how I stayed connected to the Royal Academy and never left. But before these, happen, there's 1 or 2 years before. 2015 was an absolutely dry year. Nothing happened. Right up to the winter when I went to Japan, nothing happened. Tried everything. Contact orchestras, contact concert clubs all around England to get recitals, and rejections everywhere. And one of the things that I learned, maybe this is useful for young musicians, that you need a particular temperament to become an artist. If you want stability, if you want predictability, then maybe, above everything else, then maybe this isn't the right profession for you. I tell this story all the time because I think it's amazing. I have a really good friend. She's an opera singer. And she got a job at Glyndebourne Opera, very famous opera place in Great Britain. She got a job as a standby. So not as a main singer, just to, be there in case someone was ill or whatever. And for 5 years, she did not sing a note in a show. She would rehearse the show, she would rehearse the operas, she would learn all her parts, and then when the opera production started, she'd go to the theater every night, put her makeup on, put her costume on, and then sit in the green room as the opera was going on, play on her phone or read a book or something. Then the opera would finish, she'd take her makeup off, costume off, and go home for 5 years. I think anyone would have probably given up after a year or 2 years or something, go and do something else. She kept it going for 5 years, and then after 5 years, something happened. They said, oh, you have to go on stage now because she, the main singer, she'd broken her ankle or something, and you have to go on stage. And she got her debut at Kleinborn, and then she sang more, she had more concerts, and now, she's not necessarily one of the top flying opera singers, but she's got a career that fulfills her. I think it's really important, and what I try and what I see in my students now is that you're on a journey on finding what fulfills you. It's important that you are happy in your career, and find that actually fulfillment in career is of many different ways. Yes, it's very wonderful to be one of the main opera singers of the time and be invited to, all the big operas, but it's also wonderful to teach opera and to be part of educational projects that teach young people what opera is about. That's what my friend does, for example, or to, and to believe very much in your role in the music world. We don't need 15 different René Flemings, that one is enough. But there's other work that needs to be done. And it's just now a lot of my students want to do competitions and they're less lucky than I was. And I say, look, it worked out for me. It doesn't mean that you will have the same journey. I can help you on it, we can try, but maybe, we can look for other things that work for you. And others actually were better at what I wasn't, at getting agents. There are many other people my former colleagues that never did a competition in their lives because they were connected somehow at a different level with agents and with people that made their careers without the competition circuit. It was not necessary. Every journey is different. Every pathway is different. I learned it by trialing, and I know I was lucky.
But perseverance is needed
Yeah.
to find luck or bump into luck.
Yeah.
And if you weren't perseverant like your friend, then things stop happening because you would leave the profession.
I would go even further and say it's probably the most important. It's even more important than, I don't know what it even means, talent, when people talk about talent. Sometimes, because I was involved with teaching on very different levels, I used to teach non-professionals as well as young children that wanted to become professionals, and now I teach also young people that are, adults and wanting to do this profession. And honestly, I still don't know what talent is, but I try to explain to myself that talent is perhaps this connection to sound at a different level. And you see it in a little child that, they play a note on the piano and they suddenly say, oh, it sounds like a bird, or it sounds like they connect to sound in a very emotional way. But I believe perseverance and that sheer love for what you do, consistent love, is what matters beyond that. When people say, oh, I'm just not talented enough, that means so little. I've been involved with teaching people that maybe in some sort of general understanding of the word were not talented as such, or not a lot of talented, but they loved it so much and persevered so much that they've even compensated, if you like, with that maybe sort of absent nature of instinctive playing, all that sort of thing. So you're right, it's perseverance and working out how much you love it. I needed to go through that awful time to work out that I love it so much that it almost overcomes the natural human need to earn your living. That famous phrase I said, I'm going to sleep under a bridge because I won't have no money. I believe in that. I still believe in that. I don't know what will happen in future.
What did you think of? Where you said that's very firmly that I stick to music, I don't care what about the finances. So why did you say that? What was in you?
Well, to be honest, it reminds me of I've got a really good friend who's a cellist, and he said something that went straight to my heart, and I thought, that's exactly how I feel as well. We were, funnily enough, in Germany at this first competition I've done, and he was doing the cello section, I was doing the piano section. And we were talking about this. Oh, why do we do this to ourselves? It's so pressurizing, and I'm so nervous and so stressful, and we are competing, we are in a race. And we talk about why do we need to make music. And Andre said something that totally made right. He said, I just have this fire in me. It's like a fire. I need to make music. And I subscribed to that. There was something, honestly, when I said the sleep under a bridge thing, that fire was so consuming internally and personally, which is weird. I realize how weird it sounds. I say this to students as well. Look, it's a very strange way of earning your life. It's not normal. It's not usual, I suppose. I don't understand why it happens that way. But it is like a fire. It is this burning desire to express, to make music, to touch something. It was so revealing, this current last crisis with COVID that we've been through. And a lot of students said, well, what are we doing here? We're making music. We're not helping save people. We should all be doctors. We should all, go to, disadvantaged places in the world and help them. What are we doing here playing music? And that was a big test for us. Because I admit, you do not go through a crisis with Mozart. If you go through a war, God forbid, you cannot go through a war playing Mozart sonatas. Of course not. There's a lot other things that are necessary. But when the war is over and when the crisis is over, and even during that, I think as artists, we can remind people of why we actually are around. There's something beyond this reality that current things. I fundamentally believe that in music, we say things that we cannot say with words. Because if we could say with words, we would not bother making music. The whole reason why this music has endured for 400 years, the music of Bach, for example, it's since, the 18th century, with the sort of the 300 years, we're still playing it, we're still listening to it. It's because it says something to our hearts that no words ever do. And we still need the live performances because the recordings are just like a photograph. Do you want to see your mother or do you want to see a photograph of your mother? Of course, photographs are great, but I still want to see my mom. So it's that kind of, it's that, if you like, that burning desire to connect with people. I tell this story all the time. So in COVID, in England, at some point, they released the restrictions. We were allowed to play some concerts, but it was a very strange thing. There were very few people in the concert hall, everyone wearing masks, and I was told, do not talk to anyone. You go, play, and you leave. You don't mingle, you don't speak. Normally, there's like drinks afterwards and a little meeting, and you chat to people. In England, also, we introduce our concerts. You walk on stage and say hello, good evening, and you start saying, I'm going to play for you this and this, and you explain what it means to you personally. And people actually appreciate that. They said none of that. You go, you play, and you leave. So I did that. So you play, and the concert was over, and I went backstage, grabbed my things, and headed straight for the door because I wanted to leave. And then as I'm leaving, these two elderly people were walking towards the door. And I immediately had this reaction, I don't want to be next to you. I don't want to talk to you because I was scared that I would be told off for it. And they just wanted to say to me that they hadn't been out of their homes for over a year. They're alone, no other family, and they felt so lonely all this time, to the point of becoming depressed and worried for themselves. Coming to that concert, and these are their words, was a form of resistance. And that word of resistance, people have used when the Nazis occupied France, and it was this resistance, this movement to fight against evil, if you like. And I thought, if music can mean that much to people as a form of resistance against evil, then my job is worth it. If some people come, and talk about different concepts and ideas, I've got a really good friend at home in Romania who's a photographer, and she loves listening to music in darkness with the light turned off. And she said, if I get the funding, will you come and play some concerts with the lights turned off? And I said, yeah, it sounds amazing. So we did this experience. So people come to the concert hall, lights go off, and I go on stage, played in total darkness, not even a lamp, nothing, except for the exit signs, which my friend tried to cover because they were so bright when you're in light, and these super bright. Anyway, and at the end, we had 1 hour of conversation with the audience, and it was so touching to hear what that, some lady took the microphone and said she had come to that concert and she was angry and annoyed from her work. And to begin with, my music, as I started with a program that was quite intense, but then towards the end it became happy and triumphant and all that. And she said at the beginning, the music in the dark actually accentuated my feelings. And I thought, God, maybe she hated it. But she said, but towards the end, I felt relieved. I felt redeemed. And it was really great. Again, when I was 17, I would have never dreamt that I would even like playing a concert in the dark, let alone that it would bring meaning to my job. I felt so, both these stories, the old people thinking that music is a form of resistance, those people coming to hear me play in darkness and feel this release of energy and of anger that was accumulated, that brought meaning to my job in a way that I wouldn't have learned it in school. I learned it through being in life, being in society, being with people and connecting with people. And it's one of the things that we can do very well as musicians is to be with people. I do not believe in this idea that musicians are, closed in a tower and they practice and they once in a while they come out to perform. We have to be with people. Otherwise, actually, maybe there wouldn't be much point in our job. It wasn't my student, but we all know because it was such a great story. It was one of the students at the Royal Academy. She lost her mum. And the girl had this feeling of, I couldn't help my mom. I'm just a pianist. What am I doing here? And it was obvious that she was not going to be happy just playing concerts, that she needed more in her life. And what she found is that right now she plays in hospices. So hospices are these places where, people go for their final days. They know it's the end, if you like. It's the final days. And she goes and plays concerts in these places. And it must be heartbreaking at one level, but it fills her with relevance. She feels that is what she's meant to be doing. She discovered it by herself. We didn't teach her to do that. No teacher found that for her. And I don't think any teacher can find what you will be good at for yourself. They can help you look at different options. But in the end, it's your own personal journey. And like you said, what matters is that you persevere, that you love it, and that you connect, you find this burning fire.
So just officially some very deep motivation which must be there.
Yeah.
How do you keep your ability to focus? I mean, you have this motivation, but we as musicians, we all need to practice.
Yeah.
So we need to develop a technique which makes us able to convey and communicate the idea we have in our minds. So how do you prepare yourself?
I think maybe that's when good teaching comes in place. I think, one of the most important things I was taught, and I hope in my turn to give to students, is exactly what you said, to find this efficient way of, being very well prepared. We would all love to have 8 hours a day to practice, but we don't. You live in a world, you have to work, you have different things in your life, and so it's important to be able to achieve in 2 hours what you would do in 8 hours. And again, I learned through doing. When I was competing, the situations were very different. In Asia, you are very spoiled because their organization is such that there's plenty of time to practice, to rehearse, to warm up. In Europe, not so much. Maybe lack of finances or lack of facilities, but it's a lot more intense, the preparation. And I had to get ready for a competition round in 20 minutes rather than an hour and a half. And I devised my own, it was actually funny enough, the other day, I got all my students together here at Crescendo and we talked about this. How do you prepare when you have 3 hours versus how do you prepare when you have 20 minutes? And I think that is important to learn. And that's where a good teacher comes in place. And I encourage the students to demand this from their teacher. Ask them, how do you, find a way together that works. I was, for example, sharing with students that I find that, when I have to warm up really quickly, rather than doing the pieces I'm about to play, which would take too long, do them slowly and little by little get back to concert tempo, actually having very specific routine of exercises that take me about 10-15 minutes, that warm up all my muscles, and then I'm ready to play anything with it. But I learned them through necessity, through needing to do it. And you search for it, you persevere through it, you do these mocks at home. My teacher used to say, what happens if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you go to the piano? How do you get back in shape all the time? I didn't really do it, like not at 2 o'clock in the morning, but in the middle of the day, without 2 hours of warm up, sit at the piano, do something for 10 minutes, then play your exam repertoire. See how well you can do it. And that brings focus, that brings concentration. If you want, it sounds very funny, but the lack of time was a great teacher. When you don't have time, you learn what works for you. For example, I was a very nervous player. I still am to some regard. But I had to work out how I'm functioning better. And when people tell you, oh, relax, you'll be fine. Actually, I realized that, but I actually went and had some psychological help, some mental help, that actually, for my own temperament, being too relaxed is not good. They gave me this test, and after this they said, you need to be very excited to play well. You need to be activated, you need to be alert, you need to have your energy levels up. So when I was before, and I was trying, as I said, I tried all these things. I used to travel with a thermos of hot chamomile tea, because in my head I thought I need to relax. So if I drink chamomile tea before concert, I will relax. If I eat 15 bananas, I will relax, I will have potassium. And if I take beta blockers or whatever, I tried that and it wasn't helping. And then this person, this psychologist said, actually, you won't do well if you're relaxed. It sounds to me that your test results are that you are a very active person that needs this sort of excitement in their lives to play well. You won't play well if you are sleepy. But it does come back to this motivation, this personal sheer love and fire for what you do. Because if that isn't there, it's probably best to find where it is, I think.
I'm glad you brought up how to cope with anxiety. And actually, I'm into anxiety research a lot, and I never thought to look at it from this very perspective, that what kind of temperament, what kind of personality someone has. I knew that some people need lots of stimuli, even just to prepare, and some people need silence. And I knew that actually beta blockers don't work because they suppress basically and numb all the muscles in the brain.
Yeah, and I think it works. So what was really interesting for me when I started this course of mental training for musicians is the different responses we have to nerves. And I realized, my God, that's very true, because there's this. Some people have a very strong physical response. Their heartbeat goes up, or they start having sweaty fingers or cold fingers. When I was at school, I played with this violinist who had such sweat in her fingers that the fingerboard was all wet honestly, I never saw anything like that. So it was explained that maybe then you might want to explore some medication, if you like, to control these physical responses. But for me, they never worked because all my nerves were emotional and psychological. I felt that I couldn't remember. I felt that I played too slowly. It was all about this emptiness, this void in the heart that was killing me. And the worst part was waiting for the time to play. When you have 2 hours until the concert and not knowing what to do with yourself. That was tough. But all my attempts to drink chamomile tea and eat bananas were useless because that was not what I needed. I'm fine. I don't get sweaty. And
so what routine did you change to?
Well, I was told that what I have is sometimes described as the monkey mind, a mind that is restless and it goes jumping from one place to another. And I've learned, I will always be grateful for this tutor, I learned some exercises to calm the mind down and give me something to do. I thought that, he said that what the worst for you is not having to do anything. So, for example, I have this sort of like 5 minute, 10 minute, or even 15 minutes before where I do these things. Like there are all sorts of exercises. For example, one of them is it's called the shot clock. This guy was American, so he was teaching a lot of English. So he said, in a basketball game, the big clock with the red numbers that clocks down from, I think, 21 down to 0. And he said, sit in a chair, close your eyes, and see that clock and go down slowly from 21 to 0. And when I'm nervous, I realize how difficult I would bring it down to about 15 and I go, oh no, I can't deal with 0. And he said, if that happens, reset it, go back to 21. And having that perseverance to go all the way down to 0 was actually so difficult. I can now do it a bit more quickly, but I was so restless and I was sitting there and he said, don't move, just close your eyes and see the numbers going from 21 down to 0. That's pre-performance. Another thing, for example, that I do in performance was, he said, your senses are very acute when you're nervous. He said, you're probably going to hear things and smell things that you maybe normally don't. And that's why, for example, when my family come to my concert, if I'm sitting at the piano getting ready to play, I can almost hear them. I can hear my grandma sort of shuffling and not being still or coughing. Grandpa's coughing or someone. And this guy told me to do what he called the focal point. And he was a violinist, so he said, chose to stare at a particular point at the back of the hole, literally stare at it, one place. And he said, look at it and examine it. In fact, we did the exercise with a raisin. We were all in a class. We were made to pick up this raisin. He said, it's a simple thing, okay? You see it in 1 second. He made us describe these raisins. What does it feel to touch? What is the texture? What is the color? What do you smell it when you put it? This was before COVID. We were even made to eat it. And they said, how does it taste? And he said, the principle is you find one thing you concentrate on, one focal point. For 5-10 seconds, you channel all your energy there, then you pick up your violin and play. And on the piano, we're luckier because we don't face the audience. But even to this day, I have one little peg that I stare at inside the piano. And I look at that thing and I go, I don't want to hear what's there. I look at my peg and it's shiny and it's round. And I examine. And before I know it, all my energy has channeled over there. That thing is, of course, very simple. So I'm done with looking at it. And now I can concentrate on the music. It disciplines my mind.
Yes, I exactly wanted to say that discipline gives the mind a discipline and a very strong focus.
Yeah, on a simple thing, because, and he was right, the other thing that he told me was to go, if you can, go before you have a performance, if you can, go and see the place you're going to be in and look at it before the concert, because you don't want to walk on stage and look, oh, what a beautiful color, what is there, just actually go there. And funnily enough, here at Crescendo, when I was going to play at this wonderful church, initially I said to the artistic director, I said, I don't need rehearsal, I've played this piece before. But then I go back and I said, no, I'm actually going to go there before and see the church and be prepared for it. Come for the concert in a place that I already know. There are all sorts of other things, for example, what I worked out that because all my nervousness was in my head, in my mind, Noah taught me that one of the most useful things, and they changed my life, was to, of course, still practice the piano, but at least about 2 weeks before the concert, to practice in my head, away from the piano. Literally sit in a chair, close my eyes, and play the music, note by note in my head. And he said, if you can see yourself playing every note and with that exact finger on that exact note, then you will train your brain. Because what I found that if I messed up in a performance and I stopped, it was because my brain was not concentrating. My brain was jumping all over the place. But if my brain has practiced the piece in itself, then in performance I could run it in my head as well. And it was very difficult. A piece that would take 5 minutes on the piano, it would take me 20 minutes in my head because I would keep stopping or I keep being distracted. I had to come back, and then you open the score to see what exactly. I realized so many passages, there were notes I never thought about because they were so fast on the piano. And, on the piano, when you play, the hand goes ahead in automatic reflex and you don't think about it. But when you practice in your head, you don't. And he said, try not to play on your knees. That's cheating. Just sit very still. Don't move your fingers. It's all in your head. Can you play that fast scale in your head? Think about all the notes and every single finger. That was amazing. That brought me so much confidence. And I don't want to be, unfair to my teachers, because my teachers did say, practice in your head, but I never understood what they meant until this chap really told me specifically, pace by pace, what I was supposed to do, step by step. This technique of the mental run through, run it in your head, run the piece from A to Z. Very difficult. To begin with, I would sit there and I could feel sweat coming around because I was so concentrated, like a Bach piece, trying to remember Bach without the actual instrument. Ooh, very tough.
It's wonderful. Before we finish, what would you advise, what would you say to the younger generation?
I cannot speak for anyone but for myself and for the people that I've known. I think the first thing that I would like to say is that never lose faith in the relevance of music. I believe that if the arts disappear, we as a species will, I don't want to say we will disappear, but we will probably suffer a massive transformation, a massive change. Maybe not for the better. So I think whatever happens in the world, never lose faith that what you do is useful, is relevant. People will need it. Don't let anyone tell you, nobody needs another pianist in the world. Nobody needs another. Yes, they do. Yes, they will need their doctors, but they will also need artists to bring more meaning in life, to bring them reminders that there is something else in life apart from our struggles of day to day, which are real. We cannot, as I said, I've had them, everyone's had them. So that's the first thing. Then the other thing is, and especially with the younger generation, which will live in a world that will not resemble the world I lived in. I think the world changes all the time. There are many distractions around and many different things that, so maybe I can be this rather than a musician, maybe it's something else. The one thing I do say, sometimes parents ask me, will my child be a musician? And it's very difficult to give an answer to that, but what I will say is music is time sensitive. And especially for people that get pleasure and joy out of it, give it your all, fight for it until you're the age of 18 or whatever, or a bit earlier than that, maybe 16 or something, 17. And if then you think, actually, I want to go and be a doctor, I want to go and be a lawyer or whatever, then you've got time. Anything else that you want to do, maybe except sports. If you want to be a sports person, then you have to start early. But anything apart from that can wait. You can become a banker much later. You can become a software engineer much later. In your late life, you can, I know someone who changed their careers at the age of, 38 or something. It's possible. Music doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that from a purely physical point of view, when you're young and your muscles are supple and your joints are supple, you will get the craft of your instrument much quicker than if you wait to do it when you're 20 or 22. But it also doesn't work like that in terms of starting off on a career path. As I said at the beginning of our talk, during my last competitions, I was sharing a podium with people that were 18 years old. So already the world is moving towards younger and younger and younger all the time. So what I think it's really important that you give it your all. It's not wasted time. You will gain skills and aptitudes that you will be able to transfer in any other job. I'm telling you this because I did it. I nearly became an accountant. I beat, if you like, a lot of people that were economists. They read economy at university because I had all these skills, people skills, team skills that I learned at music. I could work in an office, I could communicate with people, because when I was a musician, I had to communicate with people as well. I had to learn that. So music will enrich you. It will give you skills for anything you want to do in life. Give it your all and find your journey to this burning fire that I was describing before.
Florian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very valuable.
Thanks.
This was the first episode of the new series of the PerfActionist podcast, where established and highly experienced musicians share their views and stories regarding their careers. The list of musicians participating in this series is available in alphabetical order in the description below. Please come and join us for the upcoming 9 more episodes as well. Don't forget to share your ideas and questions in the comment section, and feel free to get in touch via the PerfActionist website, which is also linked in the description section. Thanks for listening, and remember, done is better than perfect.